When a life ends suddenly, unexpectedly, or violently, there's one person who decides how history will remember it, and that's the medical examiner. Their role is simple on paper, but monumental in practice. They determine two things: the cause of death and the manner of death. The cause is the how. Could it be a gunshot wound, a heart attack, a stabbing? The manner is the why. Is it homicide, suicide, accident, natural, or undetermined? Those two words on a death certificate don't just describe a tragedy, they decide whether police will hunt for a killer, whether insurance policies will pay out, and sometimes whether or not a family ever finds closure. A medical examiner's ruling can close the book forever or blow it completely wide open. But what happens when those rulings don't line up with the evidence? What happens when the science on the body says one thing and the paperwork says another completely? Welcome to That's My Opinion, where we break down the biggest stories, uncover hidden truths, and explore why they matter. I'm Bacon Bearzz, and today we're diving into a heartbreaking case out of Philadelphia, the death of Ellen Greenberg. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our deep dives. Viewer discretion is also advised on this video because this case involves graphic details as well as discussion of both homicide and suicide. So if you or someone you love is struggling, I will have resources linked in the description down below. And as always, this video is for conversational purposes only. Do your own research and form your own opinions because this one's mine, and let's get started. Born in 1983, Ellen was the only child of Josh and Sandy Greenberg in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She grew up surrounded by love, and it showed. Everyone who knew her describes her the same exact way: joyful, sweet, fun-loving, kind, generous. She was the type of person who made a classroom feel brighter just by walking into it. She was beautiful inside and out, the kind of young woman who seemed destined to build the life that she had always dreamed of. Ellen went to Penn State, and after graduation, she moved to Philadelphia. She was young, independent, and excited about everything that came with city life. She got her own apartment, she built her teaching career, and embraced being part of the energy of Philly. At Juniata Park Academy, she taught first grade, and if we know anything about teachers, it means that they are completely overworked and underpaid, but absolutely adored by the kids in their classroom. Ellen was also a romantic. She wanted the fairy tale, a partner, a family, a home, and in 2008, she went on a blind date that changed everything. And his name was Samuel Goldberg. Sam was from a good family. He was charming, charismatic, and worked for the Golf Channel. He had a really great job. So to her family, Sam seemed like every mother's dream for their daughter: polite, respectful, ambitious. 3 years later, Sam proposed. Ellen said yes, and to her parents, it felt like their daughter was exactly where she wanted to be. Engaged, planning her wedding, starting the next chapter of her life. But just months later, in January of 2011, everything would absolutely change. On January 26th, 2011, a massive nor'easter was barreling toward Philadelphia. Now, a nor'easter, I didn't know what this was, so I had to look it up. It isn't just any snowstorm. It's not like a blizzard. It's a powerful winter system that completely slams the East Coast with a heavy snow, strong winds, and complete whiteout conditions. Snow was falling at 1 to 2 inches per hour, and this is the kind of storm that completely shuts down the city. Schools were closing early, and for teachers, that felt like a gift. For Ellen, though, it was a little bit different. She had been feeling overwhelmed with grading and classroom stress. Her coworkers later said that she sounded anxious, even frantic about getting caught up. But by late afternoon, Ellen had gone home to apartment 603 in the Venice Lofts, where she lived with her fiancé, Sam Goldberg. It was secure with a concierge service, key fob entry, and cameras. And Sam was home too, at least for a while. Around 4:45 to 4:50, he left for the gym on the first floor inside of their apartment building. Ellen stayed behind in the apartment. Just before 5:30 p.m., Sam came back upstairs. When he reached their door, he realized that he couldn't get in. The swing bar latch, it was one of those hotel-style locks that you can only fasten from the inside. It was engaged. So he knocked and called out to Ellen, but there was no answer. Now, at first, Sam tried to explain it away, right? Maybe she's in the shower, maybe she had her headphones in, but quickly his messages turned very sharp. Sam went back down to the front desk where he asked the concierge to help him open the door. The concierge refused because policy wouldn't let him leave his post. So Sam was kind of stuck. He's pacing between the lobby and the 6th floor, pounding on the door. He's growing more and more agitated. And finally, just after 6:30 p.m., Sam decides he's done with it. He's not waiting anymore, and he kicks the door in. However, what he would find on the other side would change this story forever. Inside the kitchen, just steps from the front door, Ellen Greenberg was lying on the floor. There is blood everywhere. At 6:33 p.m., Sam dialed 911, his voice frantic. By 6:40, paramedics were inside apartment 603, but Ellen was already gone. When first responders walked into apartment 603, they found Ellen lying on the kitchen floor, just steps from the front door. Her upper body was slumped against the base of the cabinets, her legs stretched forward on the floor tile. A single kitchen knife was still lodged in her chest, and blood was everywhere. It streaked across the cabinets, pooled on the floor, and stained her clothing. Yet there were details that didn't quite make sense. In her left hand, Ellen was holding a white bath towel that was, quote, remarkably clean and untouched by the blood around her. Beside her right hand lay her eyeglasses. On the counter above, a small colander of blueberries and a freshly sliced orange sat waiting. It was almost like Ellen had been in the middle of prepping her fruit. The kitchen sink held 2 knives that were clean and dry. There was no blood in the sink at all, no sign that Ellen had tried to wash her wounds or clean up, and the knife block on the counter had been knocked over. But the only missing knife was the one that was still in Ellen's chest. Ellen herself was fully clothed, dressed in sweatpants, a hoodie, and tan Ugg boots. And she hadn't just been stabbed once or twice. Her autopsy would reveal that she had been stabbed 20 times. 10 wounds to the back of her neck, 8 to her chest, 1 to her stomach, and a deep gash to the back of her head. Some wounds were shallow hesitation marks. Others were deep, forceful thrusts. And on top of that, Ellen had bruises, 11 of them, scattered across her arms, legs, and abdomen in various stages of healing. However, in all of this, there were no defensive wounds, nothing on her arms or hands to show that she had tried to grab a knife or fight off an attacker. Now, because of the locked door, the lack of what they considered defensive wounds, and their belief that there was no sign of a struggle, the police made their decision on the spot. Add that to Sam's statement that Ellen had been struggling with her mental health, and detectives did what no homicide investigator should ever do. They closed the case before it ever began. There was no securing of this apartment. There was no extensive collection of forensic evidence, no preservation of the scene. Right then and there, in a kitchen covered in blood with a woman stabbed 20 times, the Philadelphia police decided that this wasn't a murder at all. It was a suicide. Case closed. And this is where I want to pause and bring you in. Because how does someone stab themselves 20 times, including 10 times to the back of the neck? How does someone leave behind a gash to the back of their head and it all gets written off as self-inflicted? I need to know if you believe that this could have been suicide, or does it sound more like a story of violence that police simply did not want to investigate? Now, suicide by stabbing is incredibly rare. In fact, most people who die by suicide use methods like firearms, hanging, or poisoning. Stabbing yourself to death, that barely even shows up in the statistics. One of the largest forensic studies on this was published in Forensic Science International. Researchers looked at 65 cases of suicide by sharp force, spanning nearly 30 years. And what they found is that while these cases do exist, they are extremely uncommon. And when they do happen, most involve just a single stab wound or maybe a few. The number of injuries per case ranged from 1 to 37, but the vast majority were on the very low end. The authors were clear. Multiple deep stab wounds are atypical in suicide and usually raise immediate suspicion of homicide, which I think all of us could agree on. If you saw somebody in a position like this with multiple stab wounds, that's what you would think. And then there's a more recent case report from 2020. A man was found with 19 stab wounds to his neck. At first, everyone thought it was a homicide because who could do that to themselves? But it was surveillance video that later confirmed that it really was self-inflicted. The doctors who wrote the report stressed how extreme and rare it was and how cases like that are considered outliers in the forensic world. So yes, it is possible for someone to stab themselves repeatedly, but the science shows that it's not just unusual. It's so rare that when it does happen, it usually ends up in a published paper because experts see it as extraordinary. And that brings us back to Ellen. 20 stab wounds, including 10 to the back of her neck. Is that really what happened here? However, in cases like these, investigators typically start by treating it as a homicide. They preserve the scene, they collect evidence, they dig. Only after a full investigation do they conclude that it was self-inflicted. But that's not what happened here. In Ellen's case, with 20 stab wounds, including 10 to the back of her neck, police declared it was a suicide on the spot. No full investigation, no investigation at all, to be honest with you. No preserved crime scene, no time to rule out foul play. From what I could find, detectives were in Ellen's apartment for less than 3 hours the night that she died. How do you investigate a scene this complex with this much blood, with 20 stab wounds to the victim's body in under 3 hours? How do you even process that layout? How do you process the evidence, the wounds, and the statements in that short of a window? Because a full forensic investigation takes days, sometimes weeks. You secure the apartment. You document every surface, every single droplet of blood, every possible angle. You gather evidence, you interview witnesses, you preserve everything until you know for sure. And I would love to talk to a homicide detective about how you would go about walking through a scene like this and then decide that it's open and shut. The other thing I haven't even told you yet is half of Ellen's injuries weren't documented or photographed that night. Detectives walked out of her apartment without realizing that she had a gash to the back of her head. They didn't know that she had been stabbed in the back of the neck. And they didn't know because they never looked. They never bothered to properly examine her body before deciding what happened. All of that only came out later during Ellen's autopsy. Now think about what that means, okay? The very injuries that make this case so shocking were not even noticed by detectives on the scene. And that tells me, it tells everybody, that these homicide investigators couldn't be bothered to do the bare minimum of their job. Because the truth is that they had no idea what happened to Ellen Greenberg before they decided to close her case and leave her apartment behind. Now, I want us to listen together to the 911 call that Sam Goldberg made that night. This call has been debated for years. Some people say he sounds frantic, genuinely in shock, while others believe that his words were already framing the narrative that Ellen had taken her own life. So here's what I want you to do. As we listen, pay close attention to what he says and how he says it. And before I give you my thoughts, I want you to leave yours in the comments. Do you think that this is a man overwhelmed by an emergency or someone spinning a story in real time?
Help, I need a now. I just walked to my apartment. My fiance's on the floor with blood everywhere.
What is the address?
4601 Flat Rock Road. Please come help now.
4601
Flat Rock Road.
Is this a house or apartment?
Oh no! Oh no! It's an apartment. Please hurry, please.
Where is she bleeding from?
I don't know. I can't tell.
No, sir, you have to calm yourself down in order to get you some help.
I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm looking at her right now. I can't see anything. There's nothing broken. She's bleeding. Ellie!
You don't know where she's bleeding from? Can't tell where the blood's coming from?
I think her head. I think she hit her head, I think. But it's everywhere.
Okay, sir,
it's everywhere.
You think she might have fallen? Do you know what happened?
She may have slipped. There's blood on the table. Her face is a little purple.
Okay, hold on for rescue for her. Stay on the phone. What's wrong?
I went downstairs to go work out. I came back up. The door was latched. My fiance's inside. She wasn't answering. So after about a half hour, I decided to break it down. I see her now just on the floor with blood. She's not responding.
Okay, is she breathing? Look at her chest. I need you to calm down, and I need you to look at her chest. It's really.
I really don't think she is.
Listen to me. Someone's on the way. Look at her chest. Is she flat on her back?
She's on her back. So I bring her.
Look at her chest and tell me if it's going up and down, up and down.
I don't see her moving.
Okay. Do you know how to do CPR?
I don't.
Okay, I can tell you what to do, okay, until they get there. I want you to keep her foot
Oh,
on her...
God.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, okay.
Are you willing to do CPR with me over the phone until they get there?
I have to, right?
Okay, so get her flat on her back, bare her chest, okay? You want to rip her shirt off. Okay? You need to kneel down by her side.
Oh, my God. Ellie, please.
Listen, you can't freak out, sir, because you
Okay, I'm trying not to. Her shirt won't come off. It's a zipper. Oh, my God. She stabbed herself.
Where?
She fell with a knife. Oh, no, her knife's sticking out.
Her what?
There's a knife sticking out of her heart.
Oh, she stabbed herself?
I guess so. I don't know where she fell on it. I don't know.
Okay, well, don't touch it.
Okay, so I just let her down here now? I mean, what do I do?
No, I mean, you can't. If the knife is in her chest, it's going to be kind of hard for you to do CPR at this time.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Police, which operator?
277.
Is someone coming here?
Yes, they are. You said 4601 Flat Rock, right?
Yes.
Okay, someone's on the way. And the knife is still inside?
Wait, so what?
The knife is still inside of her?
Yes, I didn't take it out.
Was it her chest or what area did
It's
it?
in her chest. It looks like it's right in her heart.
Okay, someone's on the way out there, okay? Just get
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Okay,
How old is
thank you.
she?
She's 27.
27. And there's no sign of life at all? Like, pinch her under her arm.
No, please don't be. What?
Pinch her under her arm and tell me if she responds to pain.
Ellie. She's not. Her hands are still warm. I don't know what that means, but there's blood everywhere. I mean.
I know, but you can't, and the knife is still inside of her. How far? Can you see how far it went in?
It looks pretty deep.
Okay.
It looks it's a long knife.
Don't touch anything.
Yeah, don't touch anything, okay?
I'm not touching anything. I can't believe this, though.
So wait, it was just you there with her?
We're the only ones here.
And she ran in the door, you said latched it shut?
No, I went downstairs to work out, and when I came back up, the door was latched.
Oh.
Like it was, it wasn't like it was, it was like locked from the inside, and I'm yelling, so I'm
Was your house
yelling.
broken into?
No.
So there's no sign of a break-in?
No sign of a break-in at all. I mean, there will be when you get here because I had to break the latch, but to get in.
Okay, 4601.
Now that you've heard it, I want to give you my take and my opinion on the phone call. Yes, Sam does sound absolutely frantic in the beginning, and that part is completely understandable. If you walk in to see your fiance on the floor, that's what you would expect, right? They're covered in blood. You're not going to sound calm and collected. He can't finish his sentences. He jumps around in his words. At one point, he says he thinks she hit her head, and then he says that her face is purple, and that kind of scattered panic really makes sense. But Ellen was lying almost upright, slumped against the kitchen cabinets with a knife sticking straight out of her chest. How do you miss that knife in those first moments? Could Sam have frozen shock completely, blacked out, and just not registered what he was seeing? Sure. But is it also possible that he was trying to build a narrative from the very beginning? Also, yes. The dispatcher asked if he would do CPR. You can hear him start to say, like he's going to say, I guess, before changing it to, I have to, right? Which in my opinion is an odd thing to say. But aside from that, when police later photographed Ellen's body, she was still sitting against the cabinets. If Sam had laid her on her back flat to do chest compressions, she wouldn't still be slumped upright. And that raises the question for me, did he ever really attempt CPR? And then there's the hoodie zipper. Sam tells the dispatcher that he couldn't get her shirt open because the zipper was stuck. But in the photographs, the knife is right next to the zipper. And then comes a line that pretty much everybody talks about. Quote, she stabbed herself, she fell on a knife. And I have to ask, would that honestly be your first thought? Not that someone broke in, not that she had been attacked. Immediately, you think suicide. But the last thing that stands out to me is his tone. By the end of the call, Sam sounds very different than when he first called. He almost seems like he's pulled himself together. He's calmer. He's more controlled. And that could mean that the shock is wearing off, or it could mean that composure had returned once the narrative was sort of set. Everyone reacts very differently in an emergency. I flip-flop on this phone call so much. There are moments where Sam sounds exactly like you would expect. Exactly like you'd expect on a phone call like this. And then there are moments that feel very convenient, very rehearsed. And there are a few things that I just can't get past. That's the position of the knife, the hesitation when it comes to doing CPR, and the immediate assumption that she did this to herself instead of somebody attacked her. Or that she had just fallen so perfectly onto a knife that went straight to her heart. Above everything else, those are the things that really stick out to me. And that's why I want to keep hearing from you. As we go deeper into the events of that night, keep these details in your mind. Does the 911 call sound like a man in shock, or does it sound like a story being built in real time? And that's what people have argued over for years. Now, what happened in the days immediately after Ellen's death, you guys are just going to be so mad after this. It's infuriating. The moment the detectives walked out of apartment 603, the chain of custody on everything essentially broke. Not even broke. There was no chain of custody because, according to them, the case was closed. Instead of treating it like an open homicide scene, police allowed the apartment to sit completely unsecured overnight. The very next day, the building manager at Venice Lofts gets a phone call from Sam's uncle, James Schwartzman, a very prominent lawyer in Philadelphia. He told the manager that he wanted to come into the apartment to just retrieve some personal items for Ellen's funeral. The manager wasn't sure if anyone is allowed to enter, so she does the right thing, the only person around here that does the right thing, and she calls the police for guidance. And the police are like, yeah, Sam's uncle could go get whatever he wants from the apartment. And then the manager says that she didn't want him to see the apartment in this condition, so what should she do? And the police are like, well, just call a professional cleaning crew. Before the autopsy had even revealed the true extent of Ellen's injuries, the police are instructing the building manager to have the entire scene scrubbed clean. And the manager, such a smart lady, she decided to do something that would later become crucial. Before the cleaners came in, she filmed a walkthrough video of the apartment. And that footage is now the only surviving records of what Ellen's apartment looked like in the hours after her death. Imagine if she had not taken that video. Because once the cleaners finished, every trace of that scene is gone. Also, when I reference the cleaners we're talking about, it's a company called Crime Scene Cleanup. Okay, this is a company that professionally and meticulously cleans up crime scenes so that there is absolutely nothing left. After the professional cleaners scrubbed apartment 603, Sam's uncle, James Schwartzman, in fact, enters the apartment. Schwartzman is not a police officer. He was not an investigator, but somehow he was allowed to go inside and remove all of Ellen's electronics, along with some of her personal items. Now, why did you need those specific items, James? Why was he allowed to take them in the first place? These weren't keepsakes or sentimental objects. They were Ellen's laptop. They were Ellen's phone. These were the very things that could hold evidence of her last communications, of her mental state, her search history, or anything else that mattered in those final hours. In my opinion, if any belongings were to be released at that point, which they never should have. However, they should have gone to Sam as her fiance and next of kin, or to her parents, not an uncle with no investigative role. And it's even stranger when you think about this. James wasn't retrieving anything of Sam's. He went there for Ellen's things. Then comes the funeral on January 28th. Just 2 days after Ellen's death. And before you say anything about how fast that seems, it's important to understand that both Ellen and Sam were Jewish, and in Jewish faith, funerals traditionally take place as quickly as possible. But it was snowing again, and the funeral is packed. It's wall-to-wall people for Ellen. Josh and Sandy sit on one side, and Sam and his family very clearly sit on the other side of the room, and tension is in the air. People whispered about Sam's behavior. Some described him as wailing, almost theatrical. Others said that he didn't look like himself at all, which, I mean, think about what the man's just been through in the past 3 days. However, during his eulogy, Josh Greenberg stood up in front of a packed synagogue and said that his daughter's death was not a suicide. It was a murder, and the room was shocked. And I'm sure you are too, because by that point, everyone was under the understanding that Ellen had taken her own life. However, Ellen's death had officially been ruled a homicide by the medical examiner, Dr. Marlon Osborne. So just imagine this. You're sitting in your daughter's funeral. okay? You're mourning the loss of your only child. And in the middle of that heartbreak, that just complete devastation, a family friend leans over to whisper that they had just seen it on the news that your daughter's death has now been ruled a homicide. Because that's how Josh and Sandy Greenberg found out, sitting front row at their daughter's funeral. As they prepared to bury their baby, they were told for the first time that the medical examiner had determined Ellen had been murdered. The police don't show up. They don't stop the service or delay the burial so that they could treat this like the active homicide that it was. No, everybody just lets it move forward. They let Ellen be laid to rest, knowing full well her death certificate now said homicide. So in just 2 days, Ellen's story went from suicide to homicide, and her parents only found out because someone outside the investigation happened to see the news. Meanwhile, back at Ellen's apartment, the crime scene now, which was already professionally cleaned, blood was scrubbed from the cabinets and tile, so whatever trace evidence might have existed is gone forever. And by the time police finally go back to the apartment days later, it's spotless. So tell me, boys, what is it that you're taking pictures of? What is it that we are looking at? What exactly is it that we're investigating at this point? However, even for a moment, it seemed like the truth was finally being recognized. Ellen hadn't simply fallen on a knife. Her injuries looked like the result of rage, and that was finally written in her autopsy report. However, weeks later, after a closed-door meeting with police and other officials, Dr. Osborne would change his ruling. Suddenly, Ellen's death was no longer a homicide. It was declared a suicide. Again. Now, what happened in that meeting, you might ask. Anybody would ask. But no one knows what happened in that meeting. Why? Because there are no notes. There are no minutes. There are no recordings. When asked later why there was no record, Dr. Osborne simply said, and I quote, "I have no notes for that meeting," unquote. And he said this over and over again, the same response, which was not an answer to the questions that he was being asked in his deposition. At the time of Ellen's autopsy, he believed that it was a homicide. And after the meeting, he just didn't. And the official explanation? The locked door and the lack of so-called defensive wounds. Sam also stated that Ellen was struggling with her mental health, which was not a secret. And police were claiming a security guard had witnessed Sam breaking down the door. And listen, I'm not an investigator, okay? I'm a regular person. Like you, sitting here, looking at the facts. But let me ask you this. Is it possible that the door that was locked could have been pulled so hard from the inside that the lock was broken? The answer is yes. Is it possible that this particular latch could have latched itself if the door was slammed shut too hard? The answer is yes. Is it possible that there were no defensive wounds because Ellen had already suffered blunt force trauma to her head and she could have blacked out before she ever had a chance to fight back? The answer is yes. Was Ellen struggling with her mental health and seeing a psychiatrist? Also, yes. And was there actually a security guard there who witnessed Sam breaking down the door as the medical examiner's notes later claimed? And the answer is no, there wasn't. That detail was a lie. So knowing all of those facts and understanding that yes, one of these things could have happened, why wasn't Ellen's case at the very least left as undetermined? That ruling would have kept the investigation open. It would have allowed detectives to keep asking questions, to keep testing evidence, to keep looking for answers. And to me, that's what makes this so completely unforgivable. These particular law enforcement officers and detectives and even the medical examiners couldn't be bothered to do the bare minimum in this case. And the question is, why? You couldn't even give her family the dignity of a proper investigation. You just stamped suicide on Ellen's death certificate and then walked away. When the case was shut down as suicide, Josh and Sandy Greenberg could have just moved on with their lives, or at least tried to. They could have accepted what the police told them and buried their questions with their daughter, but they didn't. They started by hiring private investigators. One of them was Thomas Brennan, a former Pennsylvania state trooper turned PI, And Brennan studied the photos and the autopsy reports. And the first thing that he noticed is that the dried blood patterns across Ellen's face didn't run up and down like you'd expect if she had been lying flat on her back. Instead, they ran sideways from ear to cheek, which suggested her body had been moved. He pointed out all of the bruises all over Ellen's body in various stages of healing. He questioned the lack of defensive wounds, suggesting Ellen may have been knocked unconscious first. He went back to the most basic thing. If this had truly been a suicide, why stab yourself 20 times, including 10 times in the back of the neck? And my question is that even possible? Now, another important note, after her death, investigators claimed that they found searches for, quote, quick, painless suicide on Ellen's laptop. But here's the problem. Those searches don't appear anywhere in the original case file, and the medical examiner didn't even know about them during the autopsy. And remember, Ellen's electronics were removed from her apartment by Sam's uncle before he handed them over to police days later. So can anyone say with any certainty when those searches were made or who made them? Now, whether or not those searches were actually hers is a whole separate debate. But even if we do take that claim at face value, even if Ellen was truly looking for quick and painless ways to end her life, does this look quick and painless to you? And I completely understand when you're in a mental headspace of wanting to take your own life, you're not in a rational or a logical frame of mind. But of all the possible ways, this was the method that she chose. And that's what I want you to think about. Does the evidence of this scene fit the idea of a planned suicide? And even with a knife, when somebody decides to do something like this with a knife, typically the route is not stabbing either. And then there was the medical examiner problem. Dr. Osborne, who had originally called it a homicide, doubled down in depositions years later, saying, at the time of the autopsy, I believed it was a homicide. After the meeting, I changed my mind. No notes, no clear reason, just a change. By this point, Josh and Sandy Greenberg had exhausted every polite avenue. The police are not listening. The medical examiner had closed the case. No one in authority was willing to step in, so they did the only thing that they thought that they could, and they went to court. Through their attorney, Joe Pedraza, the Greenbergs filed multiple lawsuits. They argued that Ellen's manner of death was wrongly certified as a suicide and demanded that it be changed back to homicide, or at the very least, undetermined. They accused the Philadelphia Police Department and the medical examiner's office of mishandling the case from the very start, which, yeah. And their lawsuits opened the door to depositions, forcing the officials to sit under oath and answer questions. And that's how we learned, for example, that Dr. Marlon Osborne admitted in testimony that at the time of Ellen's autopsy, he believed that her death was a homicide, but later changed it after that mysterious meeting. That's also how we found out that the supposed security guard who allegedly saw Sam break down the door never existed. It's also how the Greenbergs finally got access to the building surveillance footage that the Philadelphia police had told them over and over and over again simply just didn't exist. And then they just, poof, found it. Now, fast forward to February of 2025, after more than a decade of fighting, the Greenbergs were finally preparing to take their case to civil trial. Now, discovery is one of the most important parts of any trial. It's the phase where both sides are legally required to hand over every single piece of relevant evidence that they have. Emails, files, reports, notes, surveillance, it all comes out. And for the city of Philadelphia, that would have meant exposing years of records, mistakes, and maybe even cover-ups, all under oath. And on the very day jury selection was set to begin, February 3rd of 2025, Philadelphia blinks, and they settle. The settlement included a promise to reopen Ellen's case, to allow an independent forensic review of her autopsy, and to reconsider her manner of death on what they called an expeditious basis, which essentially means quickly. And this is a huge win for the Greenbergs, but the fight still isn't over. They are now waiting for Philadelphia to do, anything with this case, which as of right now, they have done nothing. Surprise, surprise. However, a judge has now given the city and the medical examiner's office until October 14th to complete their independent re-examination of Ellen's autopsy. After 14 years of delays, missteps, and silence, the clock is finally running. But the question now, will they meet it or will justice just be delayed yet again? As the release of this video, this is where the case stands. If there are any updates between now and October 14th, the deadline, or any developments after that, I'll make sure to share them with you in our community posts so that you're always in the loop. So be sure to check there for the latest. But beyond deadlines and the lawsuits, this case is about something deeper. It's about parents who refused to be silenced. It's about a daughter whose life mattered and whose death deserved more than 3 hours of investigation and a rushed conclusion. And it's about the kind of justice that we all expect when tragedy strikes. The truth is, Ellen Greenberg was failed. Her parents were failed. And if Sam truly had nothing to do with her death, then he has been failed as well. Because closure is not just for these families, it's for everyone who loved Ellen. Closure is necessary, it's deserved. And until it comes, Josh and Sandy Greenberg aren't going to stop fighting. So let me leave you with this. What do you think really happened in apartment 603 that night? Was it a suicide or was it a homicide? Leave your thoughts in the comments and let's keep the conversation going, because Ellen's story deserves to be told until justice is finally done. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss updates on the case or any of the other things that we cover here. I'm Bacon Bearzz, and that's my opinion.